I'm glad to be given the opportunity to deliver a Dhamma talk for Bandar Utama Buddhist Society again after quite a while. Last time I was here was during the Good Death workshop, and that's quite a while ago. I think that was in 2019. So I'm happy to be invited to give a talk today. The topic that I was given is walking the Noble Eightfold Path with the 7 Sappurisa Dhamma. When I first heard this, I wondered what these 7 Dhammas were, because this list of 7 doesn't seem to be familiar to me. So after I researched the suttas, I found that it is in Sanghiti Sutta, Digha Nikaya, Sutta number 33, and also a mention of it in the next sutta, DN 34, the Sutra Sutta. Both of these suttas were delivered by Ayasma Sariputta. Now the circumstances behind the delivery of Sanghiti Sutta is this. Shortly after the death of Niganta Nataputta, who is more popularly known as Mahavira in the Jaina tradition, because he was the founder of Jainism. Niganta Nataputta had just died, and his disciples were all quarreling among themselves, saying, "You don't know the Dhamma Vinaya, you're wrong, I'm right, you don't know what you're saying, you practice wrongly, I'm practicing correctly." So they were arguing among themselves, and it seems that at that time their dispensation seems to be falling apart. But I don't know how true that account is, whether it's biased towards the Buddha Sasana or not, because right now Jainism is still thriving in India. Anyway, on account of that incident, Ayasma Sariputta was rather concerned that something like that could happen to the Buddha Sasana after the Buddha's demise. And his concern was also shared by Ayasma Ananda, who, in a separate sutta, Samagama Sutta, that is in the Majjhima Nikaya, MN 104. So Ayasma Ananda approached the Buddha and told him about this, and he said that he was rather concerned that in future, after the Buddha passed away, a similar thing might happen. Like there might be some individuals who appear to be quite compliant when the Buddha was still alive, but then they would act contrary to the Vinaya after his death. So the Buddha at that time appeased him and said that any controversy about the Vinaya is trifling compared to the controversy about the practice for enlightenment. And then he listed a whole list of procedures in order to settle disputes in the Sangha regarding the Vinaya. And he ended with metta, saying that if the monks practice the 6 Saraniya Dhammas, the 6 memorable Dhammas, then there should not be any occasion for concern about the harmony of the Sangha. And these 6 Saraniya Dhammas are mostly concerned with metta. And metta is the glue that brings harmony to a community. And of course also there is adherence to the communal rules and regulations and having the right view. That's in Samagama Sutta, MN 104. But in the case of Ayasma Sariputta, he got the monks together. He related this event to them and told them that before such a thing could happen, let us now preserve the Buddha Dhamma. And he gave a list of teachings in a numerical sequence, very much like the Anguttara Nikaya. The Anguttara Nikaya was compiled after the Buddha passed away, whereas this Sanghiti Sutta was delivered during the Buddha's time, and the list also is just a bare list. There are lists of Dhammas that the Buddha taught, but there were no detailed explanations about them. The word Sanghiti is also an interesting word. Sang plus Giti. This is how the word is made up of. Sanghiti can be broken up into Sang plus Giti. Sang means together, and Giti means singing. Now, perhaps some of you might be familiar with the word Gita. Not the guitar that we play, The Indian word Gita. And you might be familiar with Bhagavad Gita, right? Gita means song. Giti means singing. They come from the same verb, gayati, to sing. Of course, this does not really mean that the monks were singing in a long drawn manner, because there is a particular rule where the Buddha forbade monks from singing the Dhamma in a long drawn manner. Which means to say, this Sanghiti, this choral chanting, was done in a melodious way without breaking the norms of Pali pronunciation. If you are familiar with Pali chanting, you would know that in Pali chanting there are several elements that determine how a word is to be pronounced, depending on whether it's a double consonant, whether it's a long or short vowel. And so, as long as you follow these rules of pronunciation, then even though the chanting is melodious, it is okay, as long as we don't drag beyond these quantities, beyond this duration. Like for example, a short A is half the length of time of a long A. The same for I and U. These are shorts. I, U, U. O and A are long, of course. And so there are various rules regarding Pali chanting. As long as we don't transgress the rules, it is okay to chant in a melodious way. And this is exactly what they did. That's why it's called a Sanghiti Sutta, choral chanting. Interestingly, the so-called Great Councils is called Maha Sanghiti, the Great Choral Chantings. So they rehearsed, or all of them recited the teachings of the Buddha in unison. I'm sure many of you would have played a game as a youth, as a young person in a Dhamma youth camp, where a person is given something to pass along the line verbally, maybe a sentence. He will pass that sentence verbally to the next person, and the next person will pass on until the end of the line. And usually by the time he gets to the last person, it's all distorted. So that's what happens when you chant individually. But if everybody chants at once, then what will happen? The moment you make a mistake, it is very apparent. So that's one way of preserving the integrity of the Buddha's teachings, by chanting in unison. So that is the purpose of the Maha Sanghiti, the so-called Great Councils, the Great Choral Chantings. So anyway, in this Sanghiti Sutta, Ayasma Sariputta started with a set of 1, a set of 2s, a set of 3s, until the set of 10. Among the sets of 7s, then we have this 7 Sappurisa Dhamma, just as you would have the 7 Bojjhangas or the 7 factors of awakening. So what are these 7 Sappurisa Dhamma, and what do they mean? Sappurisa is sometimes translated as a good person, sometimes is translated as a superior person, And Dhamma means Dhamma. Actually here it refers to the qualities of a superior person or a good person. And they are altogether 7 qualities. These are: number 1, Dhammanyu; number 2, Attanyu; number 3, Attanyu; number 4, Mattanyu; number 5, Kalanyu; number 6, Parisanyu; and number 7, Pugalanyu. Dhammanyu means one who knows the Dhamma. Attanyu means one who knows the meaning. Attanyu means one who knows oneself. Mattanyu means one who knows one's own measure, one who knows one's limits. Number 5, Kalanyu means one who knows the time. Parisanyu means one who knows the assembly. And finally, Pugalanyu means one who knows the individual. So these 7 qualities are listed in Sanghiti Sutta and is also repeated in the next sutta, the Suttara Sutta, also given by Ayasma Sariputta, probably a sequel to this one. It was just a simple list, a bare list without any elaborations. When I looked through the Tipitaka through an app, I found that there's also another place in the Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Sevens, where an almost similar list of 7 qualities are mentioned. And the name of this sutta is called Dhammanyu Sutta, AN 7.68. This sutta is especially for bhikkhus. And I will use these elaborations that are given in this particular sutta, Dhammanyu Sutta, meant for bhikkhus, but I will adapt them for more general application for lay Buddhists. However, the last point, the last quality, Pugalanyu, or knowing the individual in the Sappurisa Dhamma, is phrased differently in Dhammanyu Sutta. In Dhammanyu Sutta, it is called Pugala Paro Paranyu. What does it mean? Pugala means individual. Paro Para means inferior or superior and inferior. So one knows whether a person is superior or inferior in terms of past. So if we have the time, perhaps I will go through some of these. Now, in Dhammanyu Sutta, it is stated that a bhikkhu who possesses all these 7 qualities is Ahunaya, Pahunaya, Anjali Karaniya, and so forth. All the qualities that you chant when you recollect the virtues of the Sangha. So a bhikkhu who possesses all these 7 qualities is worthy of offerings, worthy of respect, practices properly, and so forth. All these qualities are also ascribed to him. But let us get back to this Sappurisa Dhamma, which is more general in nature. And let's start off with the first one, Dhammanyu, one who knows the Dhamma. For bhikkhus, this means the 9-fold types of Dhamma that the Buddha had taught and classified in the suttas. These are the sutta, the gatha, the geya, the Vyakarana, the Jataka, Udana, Suttanipata, Abhuta Dhamma, and so forth. There are altogether 9 of them. So a bhikkhu who knows all of them is called a Dhammanyu. But don't talk about all of them. For lay people, just knowing one of them is a challenge by itself. So how much knowledge you really need in order to walk the Noble Eightfold Path, since our topic is all about walking the Noble Path with the 7 Sappurisa Dhammas. If we read the suttas, we find that invariably all non-bhikkhus, whether they are lay people or whether they are deities, all non-bhikkhus during the Buddha's time got enlightened, got awakened by listening to a Dhamma talk, usually by the Buddha. Or those who got enlightened anyway, not everybody got enlightened, but those who got enlightened by listening to a Dhamma talk, mostly by the Buddha himself. They don't need to study the whole Tipitaka, they don't need to study the Gathas and Abhidhamma and so forth. They just have to listen to one Dhamma talk and they can get awakened. And what's the secret behind that? There is actually a formula that the Buddha used. He called it a graduated Dhamma talk. Anupupekatha. He will start off by talking about dana, and then talking about the benefits of dana, of giving, and then talking about resulting in birth in a good place, sensual happiness, and then he will talk about the drawbacks of sensuality and the advantages of renunciation. And when he reaches a point, then he will gauge the mental state of the audience. And if he finds that the audience are already engaged in his talk and they are free from the 5 hindrances and their minds are gladdened and inspired, then he will preach the Four Noble Truths. And that is the time when the Dhamma eye will arise in a listener who is sufficiently matured for awakening. So the first part of the talk was just to develop composure to some extent, because the Buddha said in one sutta, Nivarana Sutta, that if a person listens intently to a Dhamma talk, giving 100% attention, then the 5 hindrances are abandoned and the 7 factors of enlightenment are being developed to fulfillment. So when the 5 hindrances are abandoned, it means that you have a certain level of composure. And then when you talk about the 7 factors of awakening, one of them is samadhi. And the level of samadhi that is needed for awakening is at least the first jhana. So while one is listening intently to a Dhamma talk, one can actually get composure and qualify for the first jhana. So my understanding is that when the Buddha perceived, through his psychic power of course, that the people generally are already composed and their minds are ready, then he would preach the Four Noble Truths. So at that point of time, because their mind is already composed, then they can absorb the teaching and get awakened. So essentially it's just the Four Noble Truths. That is the main pillar of the Buddha's teachings. Everything else is the various supporting elements to help one understand and realize the Four Noble Truths. So essentially, for a lay person, when you're talking about walking the Noble Full Path with the 7 Sappurisa Dhamma, for the first one, Dhamma-new, you just need to know the Four Noble Truths. As simple as that, right? But it's not as simple as it seems. You know the Four Noble Truths, there's suffering, the cause of suffering is craving or attachment, desire. There can be a cessation of suffering, and then there's a way that leads to the cessation of suffering. The formula is simple. When you go through the details, then it's a bit difficult. Because in order for you to attain cessation of suffering, you have to walk the Noble Eightfold Path. And that's where the problem starts. Then besides knowing the Four Noble Truths, you also need to know what are the 8 factors of the Noble Eightfold Path. Right? And the first factor of the Noble Eightfold Path is right view. And so you have to go about trying to find out what is right view, because if you have the wrong view and if you practice, you will get the wrong result, wrong liberation. So you need to know also what is right view. Alright, and that right view that you have will have to be remembered. You can learn about it, you can read about it, but if you don't remember it, and you don't remind yourself to put it into practice, then also it will not be of any use. So that is where right mindfulness comes in. Remembering right view, reminding yourself to put it into practice. Well, you might have a good memory. You know what right view is. And you remind yourself, but you also need right effort. Yeah, because you might know that it's wrong to have anger, that you should not be angry because it's an unwholesome mental state. But sometimes you can't help it because you are under the influence of the defilements. The defilements are too strong, they cause you to erupt, and after that only you have remorse. Oh, I caught it too late. I shouldn't have blown up. So that's not the right effort. You may know that it's unwholesome to have greed. Then you go into the shopping mall and you see something which is the real bargain, so cheap and looks so beautiful, but you don't really need it. Anyway, you just want it because it's a bargain. And you get a nice feeling of getting something that you want, not because you need it, but because it's a bargain. But anyway, you go ahead and buy it because you can afford to do so. That's not right effort. So you need to have right effort as well. So that's why these three things, right view, right mindfulness, and right effort, are called the executives of the Noble Eightfold Path. Only when these three are working, then the rest will follow. Otherwise, without these three, the rest may just makan ular, you know. Take a rest. Okay, so in practical terms, Dhamma for a layperson who wants to walk the Noble Eightfold Path actually means understanding the Four Noble Truths and the 8 path factors, learning all about this. The next quality is Attanyu, knowing the meaning. Some of you might have a ritual of going for Pali recitation. Maybe you do so every evening, or maybe you do so once a week or so. You can chant the Pali, but as you chant, your mind goes astray and think of this and that, or you may not exactly know the meaning of what you're chanting. So even though you learn the Dhamma, you know the Dhamma in terms of memorizing them, but if you don't know the meaning, that's not going to be very helpful. Okay, so you have to know the meaning. And that's also a problem actually, because if you don't understand Pali, you know the meaning based on the translation. And the translation is an interpretation of the translator. So unless the translator is a really very learned, objective and experienced person in terms of practice as well, his interpretation might not be very accurate or might simply be incorrect. So Attanyu is not really an easy quality to achieve, knowing the sense of what is being said. Well, of course, the best thing to do is to study Pali. And if you study Pali also, you need to start off by relying on the dictionary, right? And that is also an interpretation of those people who compiled the dictionary. So, besides that, then you need to study a lot of Pali and see how the words fit into various contexts. And then you understand how a particular term may mean different things according to different contexts. Alright, so Attanyu is not that easy unless you are lucky enough to get a competent teacher who is both qualified in theory and practice. If it's qualified in one but not in the other, that could be confusing and misleading, and it could lead you astray. Anyway, for people who are not Pali scholars and who are not practitioners at the same time, this is your karma. What to do? There's nothing much you can do about it, you know. It's your good karma to meet with a good, competent teacher. It's your bad karma to meet with one who leads you astray. Okay, the next one is Attanyu, knowing yourself. Knowing yourself means knowing your qualities, your strengths and weaknesses. Now, since we are talking about practicing the Noble Eightfold Path, your strengths and weaknesses in relation to the practice of the Noble Eightfold Path. You may have heard the Dhamma preached by some teachers who emphasize the importance of samatha, or their understanding of samatha, as fulfilling all the 4 jhanas and the arupas before you can start to practice vipassana. The argument can be very convincing because only when the mind is very concentrated and focused can it penetrate the truth. And so, being an idealist, you want to have the ideal conditions for awakening, so you try your best to attain all the jhanas and so forth before you start to practice vipassana. But then again, you have to know your own capabilities, your own limits. Do you have the talent, the inclination, the predisposition for doing samatha practice? Through the years of teaching, I know that there are some yogis who have a predisposition for samatha, and you can very easily spot that during their interviews, how they can go into deep samadhi very quickly. So these are the people who can follow that path of developing samadhi first before going on to vipassana. And yet there are others who cannot do that. They find that focusing on a single object of attention is boring, makes them fall asleep. But when you ask them to practice open mindfulness and look at things come and go and understand the 3 characteristics, understand cause, condition and effect, they all light up and they can get very interested and penetrate deeply into the Dhamma. So, it depends. You have to look at your own talents and predispositions. It's just like the arts and athletics. Some people are just born with that talent. So if you're a talented samatha meditator, then you should pursue that path. If not, then if you are more of an intellectual who gets more interest by looking at things and understanding how things work, then perhaps you should do vipassana. However, the way we understand meditation nowadays is not the only way to get samadhi. If you have attended my samatha vipassana workshop before, you might recall that I talked about 2 suttas. One of them is called Vimutta Yatana Sutta. It is found in the Anguttara Nikaya, Book of 5, Sutta number 26. Vimutta Yatana, the basis of liberation. There the Buddha talked about 5 bases from which one can attain liberation. The first one is listening to the Dhamma. The second is teaching the Dhamma. The third is reciting the Dhamma that one has heard. The fourth is thinking about the Dhamma, considering the Dhamma, contemplating the Dhamma that one had learned by heart and recited. And the last one is learning the sign of samadhi, having grasped the sign of samadhi. So out of these 5 ways, 5 bases of liberation, only one of them is to meditation as we understand nowadays. The first is by listening to the Dhamma, the second is by teaching the Dhamma, the third is by reciting the Dhamma that one has heard, the fourth is contemplating, thinking about, examining the Dhamma that one has heard and recited. As I mentioned earlier, in the Anivarana Sutta, Samyutta Nikaya 46.38, in the Bujjanga Samyutta, the Buddha said that when one is listening intently to the Dhamma, then the 5 hindrances can be abandoned and the 7 factors of enlightenment brought to fulfillment. Right? I mentioned that earlier. So that can also bring about composure. So knowing oneself, knowing your talents, your temperaments, your predispositions, can help you to select a way that can get samadhi. Some of you might think that the only way to get samadhi is by meditation. You try to do meditation, but then you fall asleep, or you're very restless, you can't get samadhi. Well, all is not lost. You still have other methods. Listening to the Dhamma also can bring about samadhi. Nowadays, you can read about the Dhamma instead of listening, and then examine the Dhamma. So that can also bring about samadhi. So you must look at your own dispositions, your own inclinations, your own temperaments, and try to find the most optimum way to get samadhi. Then in Samadhi Bhavana Sutta, Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Force, Sutta number 41, the Buddha talked about the development of samadhi in 4 ways. The first one is through the jhanas, the first, second, third, fourth jhana. That is through formal meditation. And that brings about the result of dwelling happily or comfortably in the here and now. The second is by developing the perception of light. And when you do that, it will result in jnana dasana, which is usually translated as knowledge and vision. The third way of developing samadhi is by watching the mind. Knowing when feelings, thoughts and perceptions arise, persist and pass away. So what sort of result will this give you? So if you watch your mind, if you watch your feelings, thoughts and perceptions as they arise, persist and pass away, that will lead to sati sampajanya, mindfulness and clear awareness, or mindfulness and clear comprehension. Then the last one is contemplating how the 5 aggregates subject to clinging arise and pass away. If you want to know the difference between the third method of development of samadhi and the fourth, then I suggest that you watch my YouTube video on this topic under the Samatha and Vipassana workshop. I have explained the difference between the two in that video. Now, after this talk has been broadcast for the members of Bandar Uttama Buddhist Society, I shall upload this video to YouTube and I shall provide the link for you so that you can easily access the YouTube video. So, knowing yourself is very important, to see your temperaments, your inclinations, your talents, and that will help you to select the best way that is suitable for you to attain samadhi. So understanding yourself is very important. Don't just follow the crowd. Don't just follow everybody because they want to do a certain type of meditation. Well, what works for them may not work for you. So you have to be more discreet when you select your own path. Then there are some people who have a more devotional aptitude rather than meditative. They are more devotional. You ask them to meditate, they'll fall asleep. You ask them to do a lot of social service, oh, they'll be very happy, and their mind can get composed just by helping others. So you have to understand your own talents, temperaments, before you select the path that is most suitable for you. So that is Sattanyu, understanding yourself, knowing your own limitations, knowing your own weaknesses and strengths. I always tell my yogis, no need to compare. There's no basis for comparison between you and another person. Because the other person might have done his or her homework in a past life. But you just started this lifetime. How are you going to compare with them? There's no way you can compare. Every one of us has to walk at our own pace. We have to walk at our own pace, following the method that suits us best. Okay? So I always encourage people, you go window shopping first. Go and try this method, try that method, and see which one fits you. Whatever fits you, whatever practice that you follow and that gives rise to more clarity of mind, to composure, to mindfulness, to improvement in your character, the reduction of greed, hatred and delusion, and then the increase of wholesome qualities like generosity, openness, acceptance, patience, loving kindness, the 4 Brahma Viharas. You know, if these things increase and the defilements decrease, then you're on the right path. I've actually given a talk on that in Babs many years ago. It's called Not Too Gullible, Not Too Shrewd, and it talks about how you can choose a suitable teacher or method for yourself. It's available now, I think, in SoundCloud, so if you want to know more about this, please go to SoundCloud and listen to that. Now we go on to the next quality, which is mattanyu, knowing your own limits. For monks, this refers to the requisites that the faithful and devoted offer to them, that they should know their own limits and not ask for what is beyond the means of their supporters. For example, there might be very devoted supporters who come forward and make an open invitation. Bhante, if you need anything, please let me know. Yeah, but this is a trap, you know. What happens if the monk says, I want a Mercedes? How are you going to do that? So usually I would tell my supporters that you have to be discreet when you make such an open invitation. You could say, Bhante, if you need anything allowable within my means, please let me know. Two caveats, allowable and within my means. Within my means here refer to your means in terms of financial resources as well as your degree of faith. Yeah, whether you have enough faith in a person to give him what he asks for. Because there's one particular sutta where he said that a person who makes a promise to a renunciant in wanting to offer requisites but then does not fulfill his promise may end up being unsuccessful in his business enterprises. He will get a loss because he did not honor his promise. On the other hand, those who give what is asked for, then they will be as successful as they want to. So this is something which you need to bear in mind. If you want to make an open invitation, make sure you have these two caveats: what is allowable and within my means. Okay, so for lay people, what does that mean? Well, for lay people, that means that you also must know your own limits. We all know that the second noble truth says that desire, craving, attachment is the cause of suffering. Correct? The more desires you have, the more suffering awaits you. So how much desire are you willing or able to reduce or abandon as a layperson? Right? You have to know your own limits. Ideally, yeah, you should get rid of all desires, but it's not really practical as a layperson, because it is your desire that maintains your family. It is because of a desire of your obligation to your family members that you have to earn a livelihood and support them, and also desire that you have to support your own body free from disease to keep yourself healthy. There's all desires involved. So you need to have discretion to know your limits, to what degree you want to reduce your desires. And each person will have his own standards, right? And so you need to exercise your discretion, be truthful to yourself. If you really want to walk the Noble Eightfold Path, you know that you need to reduce defilements as much as you possibly can without affecting others adversely. For example, if you have already started a family and then you've got kids who are still growing up, but then you came into contact with the Dhamma only later, after you got married, after you got your kids, and perhaps due to some past cultivation, you made very good progress in your meditation, and you are inspired to renounce and devote your whole life to serious practice. Well, although this is a very wholesome desire, wholesome aspiration, but it's not practical, because you've already started a family. You have to make sure that you see them through, fulfill your responsibilities before you can contemplate on full-time renunciation. You can go for part-time renunciation, go on 8 precepts, go on a retreat, but you still need to go back. So you need to understand your own limits. That is Mattanyu. The next one is Kalanyu. Kalanyu here means knowing the time, knowing the right time to say things, to do things. Of course, this is not only confined to the Noble Beautiful Path, this is also very useful in your daily life. In fact, all these 7 qualities are really useful in your daily life. Yeah, because there are some Dhamma teachings given by the Buddha that are related to family life, related to worldly life. So if you know those Dhamma, you try to apply those principles in your daily life, they will also give you good results, beneficial results. So when you're talking about walking the Noble Beautiful Path, people have this view, this idea that meditation can only be effective when you go on an intensive retreat. And you can only meditate when you sit down quietly with your eyes closed. So if you have that sort of attitude or understanding, then whenever you're not able to go on an intensive retreat, whenever you're not able to sit with your eyes closed, then you can't meditate. You can't practice. Well, what is meditation anyway? Meditation is an English word that is used to translate 2 words in the Pali language. One is jhana and the other one is bhavana. Jhana is a more formal practice of sitting meditation. In fact, jhana, when it's used generally in the suttas, it means meditation in general, formal meditation. Whereas bhavana is not confined to a formal setting. It can be informal too. For example, many of you are familiar with the Sampajanya formula, or the details of how one should act with clear awareness in our daily activities. Correct? Yeah, you should act with clear awareness when you're walking, standing, sitting, when you are wearing your clothes, taking your bowl, when you're eating, when you're swallowing, when you're defecating, when you're urinating, whatever you're doing, you're supposed to act with clear awareness. That is also bhavana. That is also meditation, in a sense. Not that formal sort of meditation, but if you look at how the Buddha talks about the practice of sati sampajanya, it is not confined to a formal setting. Throughout the whole day, 24/7, as long as you are awake and alert. One of my devotees is a very ardent practitioner, and she tells people that she meditates 24/7, and people look at her as though she's crazy. And then she said, actually, she tries to practice mindfulness throughout the whole day, and that mindfulness goes on into her sleep. She tries to watch her breath as she falls asleep. And she tries to watch her first thought that arises the moment she wakes up. And because of the continuity of her mindfulness, she can even be mindful during her dreams. So mindfulness is not something confined to a formal situation, not just an intensive meditation retreat. In fact, if you practice daily mindfulness, that will really complement your practice when you go on intensive. They actually supplement one another. I've always said that the 4 hours of mindfulness, remember, recollect, remind, and retrospect, are equally applicable for daily life as well as for spiritual practice. And so when you want to develop this quality of knowing the time, knowing the right time to practice, then you can apply the 4 hours of mindfulness in your daily life. I also talked about the bar test. Some of you who have been following my teachings will know that I regularly emphasize the importance of applying the bar test. BARR is an acronym for beneficial, appropriate, relevant, and realistic. When you are able to catch your intentions when they arise in your mind, then you have a chance to process them. So you process them by applying the bar test to see whether these intentions, feelings, and perceptions can pass the bar test. If they don't pass the B or the A or the R or the last R, then you can jump to the spiritual last R, looking at them as anicca, dukkha, anatta, and also understanding the causes and conditions for their arising. Yeah, this is when you recycle all those intentions, feelings, and thoughts which are not beneficial, nor appropriate, nor relevant. Actually, if you're able to catch your intentions, most of the time you'll stop at the B, because once it's not beneficial, you don't have to find out whether it's appropriate, relevant, or realistic. Yeah. And so once it fails any one of the first 3, then you can jump to the last one, the spiritual last one, which is looking at it in terms of anicca, dukkha, anatta, and in terms of cause, condition, and effect. I've mentioned that although one can watch one's mind, understand that we have feelings, thoughts, and perceptions, that does not necessarily mean that you're walking the Noble Eightfold Path, because you may be identifying yourself with those feelings, thoughts, and perceptions. That would be wrong view. The right view is to look at all these feelings, thoughts, and perceptions that arise in your mind as not mine, not me, not myself. That's why I said in the beginning, having the right view is so important in order to walk the Noble Eightfold Path correctly. And also you need to remember the right view and apply it. Initially, there may not be insight. You are using your intellect to understand how your thoughts, feelings, and perceptions arise due to cause and condition. And then you apply this right view. This is not mine, not me, not myself. They arise due to cause and condition. But of course, it can be impactful only if you can really see through your personal direct experience the cause and condition for the arising of these thoughts, feelings, and perceptions. Now that will really give you a glimpse into anatta. And as you see that more often in your daily life, then it will change your mindset. Instead of becoming a control freak, then you begin to accept things as products of causes and conditions. But you can only do that if you have mindfulness, because you need mindfulness to catch what has just occurred in your mind. And then you need clear awareness in order to apply the bar test. And you also need mindfulness to remember the bar test and remind yourself to remember it, recollect it, and remind yourself to apply it in your daily life. So actually there is a lot of opportunity for you to practice the Noble Eightfold Path in your daily life. If you're talking about knowing the right time is all the time. Whenever you're awake, whenever you remember to do so. Of course, I'm not asking you to stop thinking altogether, because you live in a conceptual world and you need to think a lot in order to fulfill your worldly obligations and responsibilities. What I'm advocating is for you to have mindfulness and clear awareness so that you can catch those intentions in time and process them to decide whether they are productive or non-productive. So if they are non-productive, stop thinking. Come back to your senses. You can stop thinking, and then you can make use of the thought, the feeling, the perception as grist for the mill. Recycle the trash and look at them in terms of anicca, dukkha, anatta, in terms of cause, condition, and effect. Okay, so you don't stop thinking. Just because you have to think, it doesn't mean that you cannot practice. After all, applying the bar test involves thinking too. You have to think, you have to evaluate an intention to see whether it passes the bar test or not. So that is a form of thinking. So Kalanyu is a person who knows the time. So when is the time? I'm so busy. Well, you got a lot of time to practice. When you get up early in the morning, you make your bed, you wash yourself, you prepare for your breakfast, you take the transport to your place of work, you walk from where you park your car to your office. All these times you can practice mindfulness and clear awareness. Then you can go to the toilet. When you're in the toilet also you can practice. When you are taking a shower also you can practice. When you're eating alone also you can practice. In fact, eating is the best time to practice because all the six senses are active and you can watch how the mind is reacting to whatever is perceived at all the six senses. So Kalanyu means a person who knows the time, and the time is all the time. As long as you're awake. The problem is forgetting and also being lured by the defilements. Okay, that's Kalanyu. Then we go on to the next one, which is Parisanyu. That is in reference to the assembly that you are in the midst of. If you are in the midst of the Sangha members, you have to behave in a certain way. When you are in the midst of your colleagues, your business colleagues, you behave another way. When you are in the midst of your family, you behave another way. So you need to have the discretion to know how to modify your behavior according to the role that you are playing. But in terms of walking the Noble Eightfold Path, it's the same thing. How can you practice the Noble Eightfold Path in the midst of all these different gatherings of people? We all know the first Mangala, right? The first Mangala is not to associate with fools. The second is associating with the wise. Once I was leading some people to make an aspiration based on the Sri Lankan chant, Imina punya kamena mame bala samagamo satang samagamo hotu javane bana patiya. By the power of the merit that I've done, let me associate with the wise until I attain Nibbana. And so somebody asked me, this guy is not really a Buddhist. He happened to be among the guests who were attending a dana. So he asked me, what do you mean by fool? So I said, from the Buddhist point of view, a fool is somebody who doesn't have Buddhist values. And of course, when you are working and you're associating with your colleagues in the business world, many of them are not Buddhists, or they may be nominal Buddhists, but not practical Buddhists. They would have different values from you. So how can you practice the Noble Eightfold Path when you are in their presence? So this is something also you need to have some skill in doing. And some of you who have attended my talks before, listened to my talks or attended my retreats before would know of the bet and tip me formula for beneficial speech. So what is beneficial to you, what is timely, what is truthful, said politely, said with metta, these are things that should be said. If they don't pass the bet and tip me test, then don't say. So in the end, when you are in a gathering of non-Buddhists who are gossiping or speculating about some political events, what can you do? Just listen, hearing, see how your mind is reacting to all those things that they are saying, and smile. If you add anything, open your mouth and say something, it may not be beneficial speech. Well, so you need to know when to keep mum and when to just listen and not just walk away, because sometimes you cannot just dissociate yourself completely from fools. Yeah, in the world, you are dealing with fools most of the time. So you need to have the tact. You need to be tactful enough how to relate to them without slighting them, without offending them, and yet also trying to practice the Noble Eightfold Path. The last one is Pugalanyu, knowing the individual. This is not explained. As I said, it is not explained in detail in Sappurisa Dhamma, but it is explained in detail in the Dhamma-inspired Sutta. But that is something different because it's for bhikkhus only, and I don't think I have the time to go through them anyway. There are actually another 7 pairs of things that you need to know. With already 7 qualities in mind, another 7 pairs I think will be information overload. So I better not talk about that. Let me talk about something more simple. Pugalanyu, knowing the individual. Earlier on we talked about Dhamma-inspired and Attanyu, correct? Dhamma-inspired means knowing the Dhamma, and Attanyu means knowing the meaning. So it's not easy to know the Dhamma and know the meaning all by yourself. Even if you are a Pali scholar, you have to start learning Pali from somebody, right? And so you need to have Pugalanyu. You should know whom that you should associate with in order to learn the Dhamma. What sort of person he is? Is he reliable or not? Is he trustworthy? Is he competent in terms of theory and practice? Is he objective enough, or is he biased towards his own views or his own traditions? We have to look at all these things. And as I said earlier, I've already given a full-length talk on this called Not Too Gullible, Not Too Shrewd, where I talked about the qualities of a teacher that you should look out for, and also the Dhamma that is most appropriate for you. Okay, so these are the 7 qualities. Let me go through them again. The first one is Dhamma-inspired, one who knows the Dhamma. For monks, of course, that means all the Dhamma that the Buddha had taught. For lay people, the most essential is the Four Noble Truths. And in the Four Noble Truths, of course, you have the Noble Eightfold Path and all the path factors there. Then we go to Attanyu. Attanyu means you know the meaning, not just understand all these things by heart, memorize the teachings without knowing the meaning. And then you need to know the meaning of what they actually mean and how they can be put into practice for you to walk the Noble Eightfold Path. The third one is Attanyu, knowing yourself. What are your tendencies? What are your talents? What are your predispositions? And try to choose a practice that fits them best. Next one is Mattanyu, knowing the limit, your own limits in terms of more, how far do you want to go, how you want to walk the Noble Eightfold Path. It means abandoning craving. So how much craving, how much desire can you reduce practically without adversely affecting the people who are dependent on you. Next one is Kalanyu, knowing the right time to do things, to say, to practice the Dhamma, whether in an intensive situation or in daily life, whether when you are with fellow practicing Buddhists or when you are with non-Buddhists, which is going to be more often than with practicing Buddhists. Number 6 is Parisanyu, knowing how to practice in different gatherings of people, which is also associated with the Kalanyu, knowing the right time. Yes, and knowing the right time also means that you should revisit the meaning of this word meditation and open up your understanding to the idea that meditation is not limited to intensive situations, but it covers all aspects of your wakeful life. It is the practice of mindfulness and clear awareness, especially in terms of the 3 characteristics and cause, condition, and effect. Alright, so you have to adapt your behavior according to the people that you are associating with at any given one time, whether it's your business colleagues, worldly people, or whether it's fellow practitioners. That is Parisanyu, having the discretion to modify our behavior accordingly. The final one is Pugalanyu, knowing the person that you are going to learn the Dhamma from, who is going to teach you the meaning so that you can practice it effectively in your daily life, walk the Noble Path, and attain liberation. As I said, there's no point comparing yourself with others. Each one of us is unique. Each one of us has to walk the Noble Eightfold Path according to our own pace, choosing the technique or the methods that suit us best as an individual. So I want to end the talk here today. Hope that all of you will be able to remember these 7 points and the elaboration of what they mean, so that you can walk the Noble Eightfold Path effectively and attain awakening smoothly and speedily.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you, Bante, once again for that talk. Now, brothers and sisters, Bante is actually going to be joining us for the Q&A session soon. To those participants on Zoom, if you have any questions, please unmute yourself and turn on your video to ask the question, unless you absolutely can't. And to those of you on Facebook, as usual, please write down your questions in the comments and we will help you ask Bante on your behalf. Right now, can I invite everybody to turn on their videos and mics to welcome Bante with our palms together? Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Good morning, Bante. Thank you for the Dhamma sharing. It was a very insightful one indeed.
Sharing.
How come there's so many people? I could hear some people talking in the background.
They're all here to welcome you and say good morning.
Oh, okay.
All right. Thank you. Now is the time for the Q&A, Bante. Hope we can have some clarification on any questions.
You hold on a bit. I'm trying to select my microphone.
Right, definitely. But we can hear you clearly. We can see you clearly.
Select my microphone. I know you can see me, but I'm recording here on my end using Logic Capture. I already muted myself, right?
No, you are not muted. We can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
All right. Brothers and sisters, any questions? Please feel free to ask.
I thought I saw some questions in the chat. So
yes,
maybe
Bante, there is a few questions from Facebook because some people are joining us from Facebook. So for the first one, maybe I can ask on their behalf. Among the English translations of the Pali Canon, which translator would Ayasma suggest which is deemed the most accurate or relatively accurate?
Hold on. How come my video, the talk is still on the screen? Can you remove that and then put us side by side on the screen?
Right, definitely. We will just remove that. Let's give us a second to remove the spotlight and remove the screen share.
Brother Chiwat, kindly unshare your slide.
Just a second. Remove
I have unshared already.
Could you spotlight me as well, Brother Chiwat? Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, this looks better.
Yeah, but I can still see your shrine room on the screen. Exactly. Who's that?
All right.
Yeah. Who is the one who is operating this?
It's operated from the back end from our side.
Okay. Right. Yes. So the question is, in my opinion, which is the most reliable translation, is it?
Yes, of the Pali Canon.
I don't want to be egoistic, but I think mine is the best. Anyway, I didn't translate the whole of the Pali Canon, but whatever I translate, I try to be faithful to its original meaning. Okay, so I would suggest that you try either Bhikkhu Bodhi or Ayasma Aggacitta. Okay, these are I would say the two most reliable sources of English translations.
I see. Thank you, Bante. The next question is that there are many Pali translated works. By learning the translated, can we still get the right view without learning the Pali language? And how can we ascertain it? Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
As I told you just now, your karma, what to do? You are not a Pali scholar. I don't think if you're a layperson, I don't think you have the time or the aptitude to be able to seriously take up Pali studies and study the suttas. So you are at the mercy of your teacher. Can't be helped.
I see. All right. And we have another question is let's say we want to start studying Pali. Where and how should we start? This is referring to Atanyu, which you mentioned just now.
I think a good way to do it is by participating in an online course. Nowadays, there are many online courses on Pali available. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Ayasma Dr. Dhammapala is conducting a Pali course, isn't he? On online course. Yeah, if he is, then join that. All right. And then after you have gained some knowledge of Pali grammar, then I would suggest that you use DPR, Digital Pali Reader. All right. Digital Pali Reader. There is an online version available. It's done by a Canadian monk, Ayasma Aggacitta from the Thai tradition. And it's a pretty good piece of work because it has the whole Tipitaka there, plus the commentaries. And there are many resources there for learning Pali as well. And also, when you put your cursor on a particular word in the Pali text, then it will give you the English translation below. All right, so you can actually check word for word what it means. Now, if you have enough Pali grammatical knowledge, then if you check word by word, then you should be able to piece out the meaning. All right, but first you have to build up your vocabulary and your basic Pali grammar.
Right. Thank you so much for the answer, Bante.
Okay.
Digital Pali Reader, and I
Right.
hope that answers your question, brother. The next question is, how do we balance our worldly ambitions without jeopardizing our own worldly desire to achieve success and family commitments with spiritual pursuit as a married layman?
Well, isn't it there in Atanyu, knowing yourself, and Matanyu, knowing your measure, your limits, how much you want to go, to what extent you can or want to reduce your desires. You're living a lay life, of course, Lay people in Pali are called Kama Bhogi, which means those who enjoy pleasures of the senses. That's your job, what to do. I mean, you have to look at your situation and how much you can afford to reduce your desires and practice.
So
There is a verse in the Dhammapada which says that the way to worldly gain is one, and the way to Nibbana is another. All right, so the Buddha gave Dhamma talks initially for his monks only, and these Dhamma talks were all oriented towards final liberation in this life, if possible. But later on, when he had a lot of lay disciples, he also gave another set of Dhamma talks for lay disciples, which are not oriented towards liberation, but oriented towards living a wholesome, meritorious life so that you can have good future rebirth. All right, so I think the circumstances now are a bit very, very different from the past. In the past, the lay people are very, very much involved in making a living because everything was so manual. High manual labor was involved. So they were very busy and they wouldn't have time to do much. They could go for Uposatha once a week, observe Uposatha in the monastery for a while, but they would not be able to attend retreats. In fact, there were no such things as retreats or retreat centers during the Buddha's time. There was only the monastery. Yeah, you go there, usually they would go there on Uposatha days, observe the 8 precepts, listen to Dhamma talk. But nowadays it's different. Nowadays, people are so free, especially women are so free, you know. Their husbands go out to earn a living. They are staying at home. They have their Indonesian maid or their Filipino maid of taking care of everything. They have even more free time than monks who have to attend to a lot of pastoral duties, chanting, giving Dhamma talk, teaching the Dhamma, making research. You know, we are pretty busy, but women nowadays are very, very relatively very, very free. And so for women, it is a good time for you to practice. When you are at home, when the children are in school, their maid are doing everything else, you can practice. Yeah, in fact, I've been advocating daily life mindfulness for years. No excuse. It's just a matter of whether you want to do it or don't want to do it, and whether you remember or not.
Thank you, Bante. So know ourselves, know our limit, and just do what we can when we can.
Right.
All right, Bante, the next question comes also from Facebook. On verbal formations, what is applied thought before sustaining thought and breaking out into speech? And how do we manage applied thoughts?
You see, you have, I don't know what it's called. It's called Vitakka Vichara. Vitakka is sometimes translated as initial thought. And then vichara is translated as discursive thoughts. Okay, what this means is that when a thought first arises, that's the vitakka. And when you practice introspective mindfulness, you will be able to catch that thought. As I said earlier, you know, you have sati sampajanya, mindfulness and clear awareness, you'll be able to catch that initial thought. And you have a chance to process it and decide whether you want to follow it or to discard it and use it to recycle as a recycled material for the tree of wisdom. All right. So you have to catch the initial thought first, process it, then only you can practice well. If you can't catch the initial thought, that initial thought will unavoidably become discursive thought. You start to lengthen and you get absorbed into it, and it's too late. Yeah, you see those people who get depression. What is their problem? The problem is they get lost in their thoughts of all these depressive thoughts, these obsessive thoughts. They didn't catch the initial thought. Once you catch the initial thought and you trash it, there's no chance for it to continue.
I see. Thank you, Bante. Okay. I think we have a question here from Zoom from Miss Ng Ting Yen. Maybe I could pass the stage to her for.
Yeah, good. Better on live. Yep. Then we can see her for a change instead of seeing my face all the time.
Sister Ng, over to you.
Okay. Good morning, Bante.
I don't see her.
Thank you for your talk.
You're not lighting her. You're not highlighting her.
Yep, we shall do that from.
Okay. Okay. Good. Yes.
Good morning, Bante. Thank you so much for the talk.
Hello.
I would like to ask a question about one part where you say about lay people and honoring our promise to support the renunciant.
Correct.
And to kind of be aware of our karma, that we've kind of promised something. If conditions have changed and we notice the changes as a lay person, how do we judge whether the support we are giving is suitable and wise? And if the conditions kind of ask for it, how do we withdraw in a way whereby our karma and the other person's karma is not jeopardized? Because you say about the danger of kind of not honoring our promise. Can you give some advice regarding that?
Yeah, as I said, it depends on how that promise was phrased initially, right? If you did it wisely, like I suggested with the 2 caveats there, then there should be no problem. You can end it anytime because you said within your means. And your means, as I said earlier, could mean your resources as well as your faith in that person. Right? On the other hand, if you just made a very open invitation without any caveats, then it's a bit difficult to get out of that.
Can we re-update so we put in caveats?
Yeah. You can update and put in caveats. Right. And then whether or not you wish to continue to support that renunciant depends on whether you have faith in that person. If that person's conduct shows you that he's not worthy of your support, then you can always withdraw it, provided you have already got the caveats. All right.
Sadhu Bhante, thank you very much.
Welcome.
Thank you, Bhante. Thank you, Sister Ng, for your question. Bhante, we still have questions coming from Facebook. The next question is, what is the purpose that we do chanting?
Oh, okay. I gave you that slide on Vimuttayatana Sutta, the basis of liberation. And in there, there's one of them is reciting the Dhamma. You recite the Dhamma that you had learned by heart. And by doing that, it will help to compose your mind. That's one advantage of it. Chanting helps you compose the mind, especially if you're someone who is fond of chanting. Some people love chanting. Some people don't like it. So it depends, as I say, Attanyu, know yourself, what you like. Because the proximate cause for samadhi is happiness. If you're happy with what you're doing, you will get composed. If you're not happy with something you're doing, you're forced to do a particular meditation which doesn't suit you, you won't get samadhi. So choose something which fits you, which you're happy with, and you will automatically become composed. So that is one advantage of chanting, getting composed. But chanting also helps you to recollect the Buddha's teachings, especially if you understand what you chant. Now, then it helps you to recollect the Buddha's teachings and try to put it into practice. Remember, you not only do you learn it by heart and recite it regularly so that you won't forget, you also need to investigate the meaning to see how the Dhamma can be applied in your life.
Thank you, Bhante. Thanks for the answer. We hope that answers your question. We have a few more questions from Facebook. Next one is, how can one know that one is actually practicing and walking the middle path? Thank you.
Oh, I've already told you to go and listen to my talk. Yeah, not too gullible, not too shrewd. Yeah, I think Babs has already uploaded the video to YouTube, and in the video description you can see the link there. You can click the link and go listen to it in SoundCloud.
The link is on our YouTube channel. Please feel free to hop on by and subscribe to us. Yes, we have another question from Zoom, Mr. Kui Kian. Maybe I'll pass the floor to him. Brother, over to you. You are muted, brother.
Oh yes, now we see you.
Good morning, Bhante.
Oh, hello, long time no see.
Hello, Bhante.
Yeah.
Bhante, there's a reference to a term called seeing the sign of samadhi. I would like to ask what that means. For example, does that mean that, for example, getting the sign or the nimitta? Or is it, so with reference to first jhana or upachara samadhi? Or is it being able to look at thoughts from moment to moment after having composure? Would that also be a sign of samadhi?
Yes, good question. A sign of samadhi is a literal translation from the Pali, samadhi nimitta. But the word nimitta used in the Pali canon is not the nimitta that we now understand it to be. And nowadays, we think of a nimitta like a visual image in your mind, correct? Not when you meditate, you get a nimitta, an image of something. But samadhi nimitta here refers to the cause for samadhi or the meditation subject or object that you are working on. Right? So it says he grasps the sign of samadhi well. Now, suggahitang, well grasped is the sign of samadhi, which means to say that he has developed his mind to such an extent that he's able to stay well with the object of meditation, whatever that is, whether it is defocused mindfulness or focused mindfulness. So it's the ability of the mind to stay with the object of your mindfulness that will bring about samadhi. That is called samadhi nimitta.
So it does not necessarily mean a nimitta such as light or something that looks like cotton, the brightness of that.
No.
Or is it just good enough to be able to stay with the breath? For example, mindfulness of breathing, or just being able to be aware of thoughts, feelings, and perception from moment to moment.
Yeah, all of these also can lead to samadhi. Yeah, that's why in Samadhi Bhavana Sutta, there are 5 ways, correct? Or 4 ways that are listed there. So any one of these can work. Yeah, it can be, as I said, is your ability to stay with the object of meditation, whether it's a changing object or whether it's a static object.
So it need not be like reaching, seeing of the light to kind of like reaching a certain level, right? It does not have to be that.
No, it doesn't have to be that, but it can also be that. Now, because that is also a samadhi nimitta. That is something that can bring about samadhi. Okay?
Thank you, Bante.
Welcome.
Thank you, Bante, and thank you, brother, for your question. The next one, I think it's a follow-up to the chanting question. Well, is it necessary for us now, as a starter, to recite the suttas, or just following the Buddhism right school or teacher teaching and practice it, as I have difficulty to recite the sutta word for word?
Like I said, Atan you,
Not-
look at and understand yourself, what you are good at. If you're not good at something, don't force yourself.
I see. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Bante. Right. Further on to the question about seeing the light. Bante, you mentioned that the second type of composure is seeing of light. Could you please expand on that?
You want to know more about that? You go and see. You go and see my sutta study, my what do you call samatha and vipassana sutta study workshop. It's already explained there. No time to explain it here.
Yep, brother or sister, perhaps we could, maybe you could message us later on Facebook and we can drop you the link for you to know more. Sadhu, it's great to want to learn more Dhamma. The next question comes to us from Facebook. Sukihontu Bante, please elaborate on the 5th base of liberation and how to practice grasping the sign of Samadhi. Sadhu.
No, I just explained it just now. Training your mind to stay with your object of meditation, whether it's a changing object or whether it's a static object.
All right, thank you, Bante. Okay, the questions are coming in fast, but Bante, you're answering them faster. All right. Also from Facebook, could we have attained the first jhana without knowing it?
Yeah, why not? Jhana is just a name. And if you don't know anything about jhana or jhana factors, you wouldn't know what it's called, but you would have attained the state.
Yes, we hope that you have attained jhana, Mr. Adrian. And if you wish to know more, maybe you could ask us or ask Bante after this. All right. Let's see what other questions. Bante, is it possible to share your understanding on the emptiness mentioned in the, and the question stops there, but emptiness mentioned in the emptiness. I think this person also left the rest of the question empty.
Very appropriate.
Yeah.
Maybe I should also make it appropriate by not saying anything and keeping it empty. Well, actually, there are only two. I think there are 2 suttas on that in the Majjhima Nikaya, Mahasunyata Sutta, and I think the other one is Chula Sunyata Sutta. One is talking about the emptiness in terms of like what the Mahayana texts say, it is empty of any independent existence. That means to say that That means to say that everything is dependent on causes and conditions. It is not, nothing is independent, and therefore it is empty of it is empty of any independent existence. Right? From our point of view, how come this fellow is still hold on, let me disable this fellow. I don't know why he's giving me all this trouble. From the Theravada point of view, instead of talking about conditions, when we say empty, we mean it's empty of a self or anything that is connected to a self. Right? And by self, we mean a permanent, unchanging entity. So, in a way, it's similar to the Mahayana view. It's just that we do not, in this particular case, the emphasis on conditionality was not mentioned. But anatta itself implies that everything is conditioned, right? There's no permanent, unchanging entity because everything is a product of causes and conditions and changes all the time. All right?
All right. Thank you, Bante. We hope that answers your question. If you want to ask further, please send us a message later. From Zoom, we have, I think, Sister Cindy here who wants to ask a question. Sister Cindy, over to you.
Hello, good morning, Bante. Yeah, so
wait. You're not highlighted yet.
You, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Good morning, Bante. Thank you for the talk. Referring to just now Sister Ting Yan's question, my question would be, say there's not really a formal invitation, but more like a informally, so there's no caveats, but there's also no real formal invitation to serve the needs of a renunciant. So, but then it's something that is already like, in a way, somehow part of the responsibility. And now there is this thought of then perhaps not really continuing it in the long run. So yeah, in that sense, and there is a system in place for others to take over. Is that okay on karma? Yeah.
Sure, absolutely. As long as you don't harbor any resentment or ill will towards that person.
All right. Thank you, Bante.
Thank you, Bante. Thank you, Sister Cindy. Yeah, we still have a few questions. I think 4 questions from Facebook. Karen asks, is there any advice for female lay followers on what stage of the gradual training is a suitable time to ordain or self-assess to be ready?
Well, matanyu, atanyu, know yourself, know your limits, know your responsibilities and obligations. If you're a layperson and you are married or you are taking care of dependents like your father or your parents or whoever, these are obligations that you have to fulfill. You cannot just walk out and become a nun. That's one form of escapism. That was what one person tried to do many years ago. He was quite a high-ranking, retired CEO of several corporations before, but he had a daughter he had a daughter who was mentally unstable since young, and he had this problem of coping to take care of her. So he was thinking of trying to escape, to become a monk to the objection of his wife and his other family members. Yeah, you shouldn't do that. That's just escapism. If you have any difficulties in life due to family commitments, treat that as a coming debt. There is a reason why you are linked, and there is a reason why you have to go through all this. It is a coming debt you have to pay. So look at it this way: have faith in karma and accept, and do it not grudgingly or with resentment, but with karuna and metta, compassion and loving kindness and patience.
Thank you, Bante. Okay, this is a short question. May I know where to find Bante Suta's translations as mentioned earlier?
I think I've published. I have written quite a number of sutta study workshops. You can find my translations in there. I have not translated any single sutta independently. Usually my suttas or extracts from the suttas are translated only for workshops.
Thank you, Bante. We'll accept the last two questions. One from Zoom. Mrs. Liang, I'll just spotlight you first. Sister Liang. And unmute yourself. Okay. Just a second to spotlight you. Okay, there we go.
Bante, pertaining to the question that Ting Yan asked just now. So when we are making an offer,
can't hear you very well, or you're too far away from your mic.
Okay. Pertaining to this question that Ting Yan asked just now, when we are making an offering to renunciation, or we are making an offer to the lay people, we in fact in our mind we have an assumption that the person, the other party, would know their boundary in a way that, let's say it is an renunciation, they would know what is within the what do you call that, Vinaya, that Vinaya rules that they are observing. So we assume they will not think something that is over the Vinaya limits or what. And also we assume we are doing this out of kindness, and that person is receiving also out of kindness. So when he is asking or she is asking for something, she would know what is good for himself or herself and the offerer. So when, let's say, circumstances change and this promise is not fulfilled, why would this offerer be penalized?
Because you made the wrong assumption in the first place. Wrong assumptions lead to unrealistic expectations that will be the cause of suffering.
Okay, let's say the first assumption is wrong, but through the observation, we have known that, okay, this is not the right person to associate, or this is not the right action to continue. Then it is a right time and the right decision for us to move on or to retract, you see. So then the karma shouldn't it work differently?
No, you see.
And let's say, example, at first you promise to a man, and then this man later on he do something wrong. We shouldn't follow him. We know, oh, this is not the right thing to do. Then we should then retract. If we cannot get him out from there, also at least we ourselves have to do something right, isn't it?
You see, as I said before, the thing lies. The point is when if you really make an official, a formal invitation, then this will tie you. If you don't make a formal invitation, it's just doing it out of goodwill, you can retract anytime. There's no penalty for that. I mean, karmically speaking.
So if we have made a formal invitation, so can we? I mean, just now a sister asked, so we just have to make something in our let's say in our mind that we will retract this offer. Is it okay, or we must go in front to that same person to say that, sorry, I would like to withdraw my offer?
Actually, there's a Vinaya rule, but not all monks follow Vinaya rules really. There's a Vinaya rule which says that if excuse me, which says that if an invitation or requisites is made to the Sangha, then it will last only for 4 months, unless it is renewed, unless it is a perpetual invitation. Now, then the sub-commentaries tell us that even though it is a perpetual invitation, and then the bhikkhu asks for something, but the donor does not respond, does not give what he wants, then that bhikkhu should be sensitive enough to know that the faith of this devotee has been lost and should not ask again. Even though it's a perpetual invitation, the bhikkhu from his side should stop asking anything from that person. I mean, that is the responsibility of the bhikkhu, but not, as I said, not all bhikkhus follow the Vinaya. Okay, that's why I said the best thing is to have this caveat when you make that invitation, and you can withdraw anytime. Okay.
Thank you, Bante.
Thank you, Bante. Thank you, sister. Okay, one last question. We are accepting one last question from Zoom. Sister Lillian, I would like to pass this to you. Maybe we could spotlight you first. Just 1 second, yeah. Could you unmute yourself, sister? Okay, perfect.
I still see your face, not Bante's face.
Okay.
Hi, how come?
Why see my face? Bante's face more.
And
Okay.
I still see your face, not Bante's face.
How come?
How come? Maybe I turn off my video first. Okay. Yes, there we go.
I still don't see Bante's face.
1 second.
You're
not meant to see my face. I talk enough lah.
No, but
I saw. Okay, now I saw Bante. Then I dumped. When you come in, Bante disappeared.
Right. So I think I just turn off my video. Okay, let you see Bante's face. Yeah.
Then if you cannot miss, then come out to see my face.
I can see now. Bante, let's say with regard to Cindy Yan, let's say there was no formal what offering, but the bhikkhu asked for help.
Okay.
So, is it we offer or the bhikkhu ask? So
I think
like the bhikkhu says, help me to find a place, for example.
You see, it depends on what you had said to the bhikkhu before. Like I said, if you had already made an open invitation to the bhikkhu, then he can ask you for help. But if you had not made any invitation to the bhikkhu, a bhikkhu is not allowed to ask from anything from anybody who has not made an invitation, unless it is a blood relative or unless it is a fellow renunciant.
That means there's no formal or informal invitation, no? In this case,
Yeah, if there's none, then you are freedom to move on.
Secondly, are we responsible to find another group of devotees to take over?
Up to your compassion. Up to your compassion.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you, Bante.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Bante.